Hello, everyone. Welcome to Stories for the Family. I am Shannon Thompson. I am the Story Center Program Manager. And today, Philip Blue Owl Hooser will be performing Stories for the Family. Philip Blue Owl Hooser is a Native American published poet, actor, playwright, and storyteller. His plays have been produced across the country, and as a storyteller, he has been seen on stages around the Kansas City area and on the Risk podcast. He has led workshops in writing and stories for the Story Center, Unicorn, Kansas City Rep, and the Writer's Place. Philip has also been a part of the speaker series for the Heart of America Shakespeare Festival for over 20 years, and if theaters are open this fall, will reprise his role as Sir Nigel in the play You Get What You Need. All right, Philip, take it away.
Thank you so much, Shannon. It's great to be here. Thank you all so much for being here for the Story Center, and I guess just for appreciating stories, because these are the days I think when we need stories the most. And I think that stories have a very special place. They certainly have a very special place in my life. I've been telling stories, according to some people, since my very first lie. So I guess telling stories is a good thing for me. And having a better structured story is one. Today, I'm going to share with you two of my favorite Native American stories, because I am, as Shannon said, I'm Native American. My nation are the Choctaw people, who are sort of divided between Mississippi and Oklahoma. And I was born in Oklahoma. But we tell a lot of the same stories. And this is a story about the beginning times and when Grandmother Spider helped us. Now, grandmother is a word that Native Americans use to honor someone. They use the word, we use the word grandmother to say that someone is a wise older woman, a woman of a certain age, but who is a particularly wise person and someone to be looked to for help. But it wasn't always that way. So, Amona, which is a word that means in the beginning, or basically once upon a time. So, Amona. The world was completely dark to begin with. And the animal people who were there were able to crawl around and fly around, but they weren't able to see each other very well. And they thought, we need fire. Because fire will not only be warm, but they also knew it would have light, and so they would be able to see things better. But they needed someone to volunteer to go to the east, because the people of the east had fire. And it was the animals who had to do this, because human beings at that time, sometimes like human beings today, were not as bright as they should be. How could they be bright? It was dark, right? Makes perfect sense to me. So, we go with it. And the animals got together in a big meeting, and they were thinking and speaking to each other, saying, we need to go to the east so that we can get fire from the people of the east. And the animals were all squabbling with each other, and there was a lot of sound, because, animals make a lot of sound. And nobody could really hear, but Grandmother Spider said, let me go. I think that I can do it. I think that I can go bring fire back for the people. Pardon me. And so nobody could hear her because of all of the squawking and the squeaking and the noises that they were making. And it took a louder voice to prevail. And that voice at this time turned out to be Crow. Crow at this time had a beautiful voice, and it was nice and loud. And Crow was known for his beautiful singing too. And Crow, although it was dark, everyone knew that Crow had beautiful white feathers that he wore. And that which is how they could tell that it was Crow, because the white feathers were able to break through the darkness. Trust me. And Crow was chosen to go bring fire back for the people. And so Crow flew off to the east to get fire. And when he found the people of the east who had fire, he settled down and he picked up a lump of fire. We might think of it as a coal, a burning ember of some sort, but it was going to be just enough. And he picked it up with his claws and flew away and thought, well, this is awfully hot on my claws. I can't just keep this here. And so Crow put the lump of fire into his beak. And as he was flying, he realized that the fire was getting awfully hot. And he thought, I can't go on with this fire in my mouth. What am I going to do? And he couldn't figure out anything else that he could do with it. So he just sort of set himself on fire, as it turns out. And Crow got back to the people, and he dropped the fire before he got there. And Crow got back to the animals who were all still gathered waiting for fire. And they at first they didn't know, because they were looking for fire. And Crow didn't have fire. And it was just Crow all of a sudden. And they said, who is that? And Crow said, it's me, Crow. Everybody thought, that's not how Crow sounds. Crow has a beautiful voice. And Crow's like, no, it's me. I had the fire in my mouth, and it caused all of my singing ability to go, and my voice is forever ruined, and look, my feathers, they've turned all black. It's still dark. So the same way that they knew he had white feathers was how he knew that he now had all black feathers, which is how Crow is today. But they knew all of this when it was in the dark. I don't know. Trust the story. So they thought, we still need fire. And so they began to squabble again, and there was cawing and braying and mooing and barking. And still over this, Grandmother Spider was saying, excuse me, I think that I could go get fire. I think that I could. But nobody could hear Grandmother Spider. And so the voice that was able to predominate the loudest this time was Buzzard. And Buzzard said, I will go get fire. Now, Buzzard was noted because he always had such a beautiful array of flowers and feathers that covered his head. And they were long, and they were very shiny, something that's called iridescent. And they were green and blue and all sorts of beautiful colors. And again, it's still dark. I don't know how they knew this, but I trust the story. And so Vulture said, yes, I will go get the fire from the people of the East. So flies off, is able to pick up another ember of the fire, and thought, wait, Crow kept this in his mouth, and that didn't do any good. I will hide the fire in my feathers here on my neck. And he flew and flew, and once he got back, the people, all the animals are still watching the sky, looking for when there's going to come this fire, this wonderful fire that they're all been waiting for, and Buzzard is bringing it back, and they couldn't see anything, and suddenly Buzzard was back, and he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I dropped the fire a few hundred miles back because that fire, just like Crow, had the same problem, except I was trying to keep it in the feathers on my back, and it's burned all of the feathers off, all of my head and my neck, and I don't have fire for you." And this today is how they say that Buzzard ended up not having any feathers on his neck or his head, because all of his descendants now don't have any feathers there. Again, I trust the story. So they're still in the same boat, and they're trying to figure out what they're going to do. And so everybody's saying, I don't know about this. This doesn't sound that good to me. I don't think there's anybody who could do it. But Grandmother Spider said, I think I know a way. I think that I could do it if anybody. And nobody could hear her. Nobody was listening. But instead, someone else stepped forward and said, I will go get fire for the people. It may take a little bit longer because I walk on the ground. I don't fly. And everybody thought, oh, I know who that voice is. It's Possum. Pardon me. And Possum, noted for his beautiful tail at that time. It was very lush and all covered with fur and hair. And he said, you know, it will take me a little bit longer, but I'll do that. I'll go get fire for the people. And so they said, right, Possum, you want to do it? That's fine. Go get fire for us. So Possum goes and gets fire and is trying to think of, you know, things didn't work out for the other animals so far. I need to find a way that I can carry fire back to the people. And he came upon a plan. And Possum, knowing that he had that big, thick tail, he thought, if I wrap my tail around the fire, then it's so thick with all the hair, I'll still be fine. And so Possum goes and he grabs the fire and he's carrying it in his tail and he comes back. And of course, before he comes back, the fire has burned all of the hair off of his tail, which, as they say, is why today Possum does not have any hair at all on his tail. Well, after the experience, none of the birds wanted to try this, and now none of the four-legged animals wanted to try this either. And still, when they said, does anybody want to, you know, give it a shot? Is there anybody who'd be willing to go get fire for us? The only voice that spoke up was that of, you guessed it, Grandmother Spider. And she said, I think I know how to bring fire back. And everybody's like, yeah, sure. You're just a spider. Like, this is going to work out. But Grandmother Spider set off. And as she went, she stopped by the edge of a lake and she picked up this mud that was there. And she formed this mud into a kind of container, the way people today will still work with clay and they will make like cups or plates or vases or sometimes statues or the movie Ghost they will also make. But she was able to take this mud and form it into a container. And she also made a little lid to go on the top of it. And she traveled all the way to the east and found the people of the east and found their fire and took a little bit of that fire and she put it into her little clay jar that she had made, and she put the lid on the top, and there were holes in the lid so that the fire could breathe, you know, like you would do. And she carries it back to the people, all the animal people, and she sets it down, and they're like, we don't see any fire. And she opened her clay pot, and there was the fire, still burning. And that is how Grandmother Spider brought fire to the animal people and the two-legged people of the Choctaw Nation. And to this day, not only will you find that Crow is still all black and Buzzard doesn't have any feathers on his head and Possum doesn't have any hair on its tail, but many Choctaw will still honor Grandmother Spider for her heroic deed and her cleverness by having a depiction of Grandmother Spider with her four legs going up and her four legs coming down. And then she's also got a clay pot. And this honors that she was able to bring fire back to the people. And they were able to see each other for the first time. And they were able to warm each other and be warm and cook food and all of the things that fire was able to do for them. And Ataha. And Ataha does mean that the story is over, but I wanted to share with you a very special reason for telling you this story, and that it is regarded as a medicine story. Now, when you're sick, you take medicine. You may know that some Indian nations, some Native American nations, or original nations people have someone who is known as a medicine person, because it can be a medicine man or it can be a medicine woman. Sometimes it's just a person because it doesn't have to be a man or a woman. Someone who is able to do some sort of healing, some sort of magic in many ways in order to help people. Well, there is medicine in this story, and I believe that one of the main things that this story teaches us is it's always a good thing to listen to women, particularly older women, who can be very wise indeed because they have lots of experience and they are still able to bring the fire when it's needed. And Ataha, that story is over. Now, I'm also going to tell you the first story that I have learned, which remains to this day one of my favorite stories of all time. And it is about a character known as Coyote. Now, usually, Coyote stories are only supposed to be told when it is winter, when it is the snow season outside. And I've decided, and after much thought, that it would be appropriate to tell a Coyote story now because we're kind of in a sort of winter. It's not all that cold, although it's certainly not all that warm today. But it's kind of like a silent time, which is what winter is like for me a lot. I like the silence of winter. And besides, this is one of my favorite stories, and it's also a medicine story. And that's why I always love sharing this story. So, this story is about Coyote. And so, Ataha. Sorry, not Ataha. I forgot what part of the story I was in. I was in the wrong story, apparently. Amona. In the beginning, once upon a time, this is the way things were. Coyote was out looking for food. Now, if you're not familiar with Coyote, I will give you a slight visual representation because I have used this as my Coyote pup in telling stories about Coyote. But in case you're really not familiar with him, Coyote is known as he who imitates, or he who copies, or because these things get updated every once in a while, he who Xeroxes, and sometimes he who only reposts on Facebook. Because Coyote likes to imitate. He likes to reproduce things that he's seen other people do. And he doesn't always think for himself. So Coyote was out looking for food one morning, and he sees a rabbit. And he's thinking, oh, good breakfast. And he starts crawling up to where a rabbit is. And he soon realizes that this rabbit is a medicine person. There's a medicine person who is able to do some form of magic. Because as he's watching this rabbit, it begins to drum. And while he's drumming, he also says the magic spell words, ah! And when he says that, his eyes, rabbit's eyes, fly out of his head and they go land on a tree. And Coyote is thinking, this is the greatest thing prior to sliced bread. And so he rushes up to the rabbit a little bit closer. And as he's doing that, he sees the rabbit go, eyes, Whittam, come back here. And his eyes come back. And they just plop, fall right back into his head. Coyote has forgotten entirely about breakfast or being hungry. And he runs up to Rabbit and he says, Rabbit, you got to teach me how to do the trick. I want to know how to do that trick. Show me how to do the trick. I want to know how to do the trick. Oh, Rabbit, please tell me how to do the trick. And Rabbit says, no. And Coyote says, but no, I really want to know how to do the trick. I love that trick. I think that's the greatest trick I've ever seen. I really want to know how to do the trick. I want to do the trick. I want to do the trick. Please show me how to do the trick. And Rabbit says, no. And Coyote says, look, I was going to have breakfast, and that could still happen unless you teach me how to do that trick with the eyes. And Rabbit goes, okay, but look, Coyote, I know exactly how you are. You cannot do this trick more than 4 times in a single day, or something terrible will happen. And Coyote says, okay, I promise. I want to do the trick. Show me how to do the trick. I want to do the trick. I want to show me how to do that trick. And Rabbit says, okay. First of all, you have to say the magic incantation. You have to start off by saying, yeah. And Coyote said, okay. Yeah. And when Coyote does this, his eyes fly out of his head and they land up on a tree branch. And Coyote is like, I wish I could see how cool this looks. And Rabbit says, and in order to get your eyes back, you say, Whittam, come back here. And Coyote's like, oh, that's right. Okay, Whittem, come back here. And his eyes float back and then go plop back into his head. And Coyote is so thrilled that he's able to do this. And he's forgotten completely about breakfast at this point. He's just thrilled this has happened. The rabbit has taught him how to do this wonderful trick. So Rabbit goes off to be in another story. And Coyote says, I have got to practice this thing so that I'm sure that I'm doing it right. And then I will go to the nearest village and do something wonderful there. I will show them how to do this trick that I can do. And Coyote goes, okay. What does that go? Yeah, and his eyes fly out of his head. And he goes, Whittem, come back here. And his eyes plop back into his head. And he decides, I'm going to do this over in the other direction. And he says, yeah, and his eyes fly out of his head. And then, Whittem, come back here. And plop. And he can see again. And he's like, this is so wonderful. I wonder if I could do it under my leg. And so he goes, hi, yeah, and he's able to throw his eyes under his leg, and they go up, and they land on a whole different tree branch than ever before. And he says, Whittem, come back here, and his eyes, because that's the song that always plays when your eyes are going back in your head. And he just, plop, and his eyes are back in his head. And he thinks to himself, okay, I'm set. I'm not going to do this anymore right here where nobody can see me. Instead, I am going to find the nearest village, and I'm going to show those people, and they are going to give me food for being so clever. They might even give me an Oscar. Trust me. So, Coyote goes to find the nearest village, and he calls all of the people around and says, hey, come here. All right, everybody, come on. I want to show you this thing. Like, come on, you're going to love this. This is so wonderful. Come on. Okay, everybody. And he gathers the entire village around. And he goes, watch this. Yeah, and his eyes fly out of his head. Pardon me. And they land up on top of a tree on the branch. And they're just sitting there. And all of the people are thoroughly amazed at this. Coyote, this is a wonderful thing. How are you able to do this? And he goes, you think that's something? Just watch this. And he says, oh, Whittem, come back here. Nothing happened because he had done it more than 4 times. This was the terrible thing that Rabbit was saying. He's not thinking all of that. He's just thinking, well, I need my eyes back. Come on, eyes, Whittem, come back here. Whittem. And, these were Native American people, and they could all take a joke. So they were like, oh, okay, yeah, see you around. And they go back to what they were doing. And his eyes are just sitting there up in this tree, just staring. They don't have any lids. They can't blink. So his eyes are just staring on this tree branch, looking around. And Coyote's like, come on, eyes. Whittem, come back here, please. Whittem, come back here. And he hears this sound. Ah! And Coyote goes, that sounds like a crow. Come on, eyes. Whittem, come back here. Ah! And the crow's getting closer. And the crow swoops down and eats Coyote's eyes. And now Coyote is blind. And Coyote, you may be able to guess at this point, Coyote is not someone who suffers in silence. So Coyote is crawling around on the ground going, it is shame. Pusley. Okay. Sometimes when you're trying to translate things, you realize that you can't translate them exactly because in the language the story is told, that is a pun. And the thing about puns is they really don't translate from one language to another very well. So trust me, if you go to the right powwow and tell this story and you get to that part and you say, Pusley, it gets a big laugh. You don't have to laugh at it, though. That's fine. So he's crawling around, and he's not able to see, and because he is blind, he has nothing, and he reaches up, and he hears the sound of another animal, and it's this friend Mouse. Mouse is a very tiny thing. Mouse says, "Hey, Coyote, is that you? What are you doing screaming around like that for?" And Coyote says, I don't have any eyes. I can't see. Can't you see I'm blind? And Mouse goes, well, look, if it'll make you feel any better, I'll give you one of my eyes. And Coyote says, yes, please. That's got to be better than nothing. Please, I want one of your eyes. And so, okay, a mouse would fit in the palm of my hand, and a coyote is about the size of a German shepherd. So when Mouse takes out his little tiny eye, goes, dink! And he gives it to Coyote, and Coyote puts it in his eye hole there, and it's so tiny. It just rolls around like a BB or a bead in his eye hole where the eye should be, and it hardly lets in any light at all. So Coyote really still can't see, and he's still effectively blind. But Mouse has gone off elsewhere at this point. And Ken is so roaming around the prairie, just crawling, not able to see it. He's just crawling so high in the shape of Usmani. Okay, it's still funny, even if you don't understand it. So he hears this other, and he hears this buffalo say, hey, Coyote, what are you doing screaming around like that for? And Coyote says, I know that voice is Buffalo, you got to help me. I've got to see with is this little tiny mouse eye. And Buffalo says, well, look, if it'll help you be any happier and any quieter, I'll give you one of my eyes. So gives him this buffalo eye. Now, okay, Coyote is about the size of a German shepherd. A buffalo is about the size of a minivan. So he gives him this huge eye that is just too big. He can't put it all in. Half of it is hanging out on his cheek. And Coyote's walking around and goes, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this. I've got this little tiny mouse eye. I'm getting a headache from all this. So he tears his eyes out. And just when at that point, he goes over and he finds these daisies that are to this day called Coyote's eyes. And he puts them in, and he's able to see. Unfortunately, like many flowers do, these daisies start to fold up in the setting of the sun. And because it's taken him all day to find these, and he says, I'm not gonna lose these eyes again. This is not how this is gonna happen. And at this point he sees this woman who is picking berries. She has a basket on her back called a burden basket that she's picking berries and she's throwing them into this basket. And he thinks, I'm gonna trick her somehow. And he runs up to this woman and he says, quick, hurry, catch that pheasant. And the woman looks around and she goes, what pheasant? Where? And Coyote says, that pheasant over there, it's on the other side of that tree. And this woman's going, this is a very open area of the prairie. She says, what tree? Where? He says, the one's on the other side of that mountain. And the woman says, well, hang on a second. You can see a pheasant that's on the other side of a tree that's on the other side of a mountain? How can you do this? And Coyote says, oh, with my magic flower eyes. But he's getting away. And the woman says, magic flower eyes? And Coyote says, yeah. And the woman says, I must have a pair of eyes like that. And Coyote says, you must. And she says, yes, I'd give anything for a pair of eyes like that. And Coyote says, well, I could trade you my magic flower eyes for your regular eyes. And so they trade eyes there on the desert. And the woman puts them in, and she's amazed that all the colors are so wonderful. But they start getting dark, because the petals are folding up. And she says, wait, I know who you are now. You're that old trickster, that stink Coyote. And she rips out the flower eyes. And she says, give me my eyes back. And Coyote says, no. You didn't want your eyes, so you will have no eyes at all. And he begins to drum. And Coyote begins to do his own medicine on this woman. And he says, you will forever have to crawl and feel your way around the way that I did. And that basket will become a shell on your back that you and your children will have to carry for the rest of your lives. And she began to shrink and continued shrinking and shrinking until she was smaller and smaller, until she became the person that we know as Yushubli, or snail. And Taha, that is the end of this story. But the reason I wanted to share this story with you is I think it's got some really powerful medicine to it. And that's the idea that in this story, there is something, it talks about something that's special to people and individual to all people. And it's shown as being through your eyes, because your eyes are special and they are beautiful. And your eyes are, for lack of a better way of saying it, your eyes. No one else can see the world the way that you do. And that the idea is that you share your vision, your way of understanding the world, the way that mouse and elephant did, but you don't give it away. You don't give it all away to other people. You hold on to some of it so that you can continue seeing. And the snail woman has to suffer because she was so willing to give up what was unique and individual about her eyes. And Taha, that is the end of that story. And we have reached the end of this story time. Please, I hope that you have enjoyed this. Fill out. There's a questionnaire and a form for you to fill out, and I hope that you will do so. I hope that you have enjoyed storytelling today, and I have certainly enjoyed telling the stories with you. And at this point, it is with sadness that I must say, Ataha.